Got cut off, had a message come through. So where was I? So the loving presence. So it's very important actually as part of like the chaplain's training. You probably do this to a degree already, but it is to have them pair up and to be honest and open and sharing about their lives, about the things that they wish had never happened, their biggest regrets, the things that have been most painful. It's very important for them to be able to speak about anything that's ever happened to them, because if they can't, it means they're not free of it, which means that they're likely to be triggered if anything even closely resembles it comes up. And so as part of the training, it's important that the pure coaching gets utilized between each other. And yeah, we can talk about that later, as about how to do that effectively. But essentially, the loving presence is a continual thing that requires a lot of work and attention to be able to do well. But when we do it well, it's the feeling of extreme safety. So something very important is ideally not like very little reaction physically to anything that's said. Because even a caring face, like when someone has something very common people do is they have a face that says, I understand, and they change their expression. When someone is emotionally vulnerable and they are feeling it, any change in your face or body can be felt as rejection, as judgment, as criticism. It can be so subtle and subconscious they're not even aware of it. But it's important that we train ourselves to be still and have like a presence of just like everything you say is okay. Everything you say and do is okay with me. So whatever expression you have, that means that naturally, that is the one to practice and to utilize while someone is going through and sharing something. So this is for when they're in the moment of sharing something deep, maybe something that's so challenging they don't really want to talk about it. Very important. Any change here can be felt as criticism. So loving presence. Then we have activating senses. So with that, literally like a great way to do it is to close your eyes for a few minutes, to maybe begin by doing a top-down physiological assessment of your body. Just be aware of what you can feel, and then do it for your hearing. So the three senses that are most important are feeling. That's like the primary. Hearing is very important because you can hear slight changes in people's voice and their voice cracks or something. So it can be very subtle, but it can mean a lot. And then lastly, you open your eyes and do the same thing, like get into peripheral vision. So the way to get into peripheral vision is you look straight ahead, but be aware of everything on your left and right as far as you can. And the same thing, top and bottom. So spend a few minutes like just accessing your senses in that way, peripheral senses, activate them, prime them before you go into the environment. And then also, it also helps you to create that abyss of silence inside too. Because if you're giving attention to activating your senses and what's happening out here, or even physically within you, the talking is likely to be reduced because your attention is focused there. And then, so the abyss of silence. So this is something that will probably take a lot of time and care to get good at, but it is to stop trying to figure out what needs to be said and stop narrating. Because when you're talking in your head, it's the equivalent while someone's talking to you. So you've got someone here that's sharing with you something very painful and it's something they're going through. Your thinking is the same as someone next to you, or very similar to someone next to you talking in your ear. If someone's talking in your ear, what are the chances you're going to be able to receive what's being said with any depth and with any real like clarity? It's very difficult. So a still mind, deep abyss of silence. Then the virtual reality listening. So that is to ideally, as best you can, whatever someone's sharing, to build a picture or an experience related to it. So it's not just visual, but that helps as if you're reading a book, and when you're reading a book, you create a version of it within yourself, which means when something happens, you feel it. It's that we want to get really good at. And it doesn't matter how good someone is. I used to be terrible at it when I first started, which is about 12 years ago. I used to really find it really hard to see anything in my mind. I found it very, very difficult. With training though, it gets better and better. And the better we can build an environment that includes as many senses as possible, the better able we are to really get where people are and to know what needs to be done. And so as they're speaking, to build a representation of that. So if someone talks about a clock tower, for instance, you see a clock tower, you look over there and there's a clock tower, and you represent it as best you can. It doesn't have to be identical to what their representation is, but it needs to be your representation. And you'll be surprised actually when you get good at it, how similar these things are to actually what someone means. It's really good. So that's that. Oh yeah, and then feeling into that environment. So this is, you've activated your senses. Just like if you're reading a book or you're watching a movie or anything like that, like if someone something happens that shocks you, so you might jump out here because your attention's been so immersed. That's what can happen when you're in this virtual reality world that you've created. You can feel it and you respond. And so when you feel it, you know where they need to go. Then we have the last two, which is interrupting. Again, use this with care. In fact, to begin with, I would recommend most of the time not doing much interrupting whatsoever. Most people interrupt too soon. So I don't know what your practice already is, like what your chaplains already do, but what I've recognized in many people, because I've worked with over 1,000 individuals and many thousands through workshops and interactive talks and things. So what has been so common is how hard people find it to stay silent. They have to say something, even if it's just like nodding and interrupting, which is something we do not want to do when we're listening deeply. Any reaction, remember, can be felt as judgment or criticism, even if it seems to be agreement. So holding silence for longer is very important. So the interrupting probably is something to be used really very rarely and with care to start with. And then we have intervention, and that is the utilization of their language. So you can wait for a natural pause when they're finished speaking, and whatever it was that felt most emotive to you, you just say the exact words, ideally in the exact way that it was hurt, that you received it, ideally with the same physical expression if you can. And if you do that and you get it right, my God, the depth that people go to when you've really shown them something within themselves that they didn't know was there. And if you've done a good job of creating that safe space, they welcome it, they go there, they experience something, and it gives them the chance to transcend it. It's very, very beautiful. So there you go. That is the fast version of the 7 elements of pure coaching. It is incredibly beautiful, incredibly profound, and requires a hell of a lot from the, excuse my language there, I don't know if you care about me saying that. It requires a lot from the person delivering it. There's a lot of responsibility on the person doing this, far more than the other person, because we have to be like within ourselves. It begins within us, doesn't it? And so we have to be able to extend it to one or many. When I've done talks of rooms of 60 to 100, I'm using this space for them too. And there's certain ways you have to bring them in when it's a big room, but it can be utilized for loads of people and utilized for an individual. So there you go. If you have any questions, let me know. And if you want to set up a training, I'd very much love to do something with you and your guys. Okay, thank you, and I'll speak to you soon.